Imagine the business is yours. You find a piece of land, cover it with used cars, invite a few hundred dealers, and collect a fee every time a gavel falls. From the outside, it looks like one of the cleanest business models in the industry. The cars arrive already owned by somebody else. The buyers bring their own money, and the auction simply stands in the middle while millions of dollars change hands. On a busy sale morning, the lanes are loud, the parking lots are full, and vehicles seem to move through the building faster than anyone can count them. You look at that scene and think the property must be printing money. But the crowded yard is showing you the most flattering version of the business. A parked vehicle creates almost no value until a qualified buyer bids, the seller accepts, the payment clears, and the title can legally move. The auction can be surrounded by thousands of cars and still miss its financial target, because inventory offered is not the same thing as inventory sold. That distinction is the key to everything that follows. An auto auction is not really a used car dealer with a very large parking lot. In its most common wholesale form, it is a two-sided marketplace with an expensive physical machine attached to it. The auction often does not own the vehicle, does not take title to it, and does not earn the difference between the wholesale price and the eventual retail price. Instead, it can charge the seller, charge the buyer, and sell inspection, transportation, storage, reconditioning, title, and administrative services around the same transaction. That sounds almost perfect because you get paid on an asset you never had to buy. But the business comes with a brutal requirement. Enough vehicles and enough serious buyers must show up together, week after week, to keep the machine moving. If either side disappears, the cars stop being inventory and start becoming scenery. So let's follow one ordinary used car through that machine, count every place the auction can earn money, and then build a representative owner's profit and loss statement from the ground up. By the end, we'll know whether an auto auction is a brilliant fee business or just a very expensive parking lot with debt attached to it. The journey usually begins somewhere less dramatic than an auction lane. A customer trades a 6-year-old sedan into a dealership while buying a newer SUV. The dealer now owns a car that may be perfectly usable but wrong for its retail lot. Maybe it has too many miles, maybe it does not fit the dealership's brand, or maybe the dealer already has 4 similar cars sitting unsold. Keeping it ties up cash and consumes space, so the dealer sends it to a wholesale auction, where another dealer may value it differently. That trade-in is only one source of supply. Rental companies regularly retire vehicles after they reach a target age or mileage. Leasing companies receive cars when contracts end. Banks and finance companies recover vehicles after borrowers default. Commercial fleets replace vans and pickups on planned schedules, while manufacturers and their captive finance companies remarket off-lease inventory. Each seller arrives with a different type of vehicle, but they share one problem. They need access to buyers without negotiating each car one at a time. The scale is enormous. Members of the National Auto Auction Association sold more than 8 million wholesale used vehicles in 2025, with a gross value above $100 billion. About 820,000 of those transactions were digital only, meaning no traditional physical lane was required. But whether bidding happens in a building or on a screen, the economics still begin with the same question. Can the marketplace bring enough supply and demand together to create a real price? This is where the business starts behaving less like a car lot and more like an exchange. Sellers want a large pool of buyers because more competition can produce stronger bids. Buyers want a deep run list because driving to an auction, assigning employees, arranging financing, and transporting vehicles only makes sense if there is enough inventory worth buying. More sellers attract more buyers improve the selling environment, and stronger results attract more sellers the following week. It is a powerful flywheel once it is moving, but it is painfully difficult to start. A new auction needs vehicles before dealers have a reason to attend. Yet commercial sellers hesitate to consign hundreds of vehicles to a marketplace with no proven buyer base. You cannot solve that problem with a few social media ads. You need dealer relationships, credible inspection standards, reliable title processing, and usually at least one commercial account capable of giving the run list real depth. That commercial account might be a bank, a rental fleet, a dealer group, or a finance company. Winning one can add hundreds of vehicles to a sale calendar. Losing one can remove those vehicles just as quickly. The auction may have thousands of registered dealers in its database, but registration does not pay the bills. Active bidders buying cars this week are what matter, and that creates the first hidden concentration risk. A crowded lane can make the auction look diversified because dozens of buyers are raising their hands, while a large share of the vehicles may have come from only 2 or 3 sellers. If one institution changes vendors, moves its vehicles online, or simply produces fewer repossessions and lease returns, the auction's weekly volume can fall before the owner has time to reduce payroll, property costs, or debt. This also explains why location means more than finding cheap land outside a city. The auction has to sit close enough to dealer networks, major highways, vehicle transport routes, and sources of commercial inventory. A remote property may be inexpensive, but every extra mile increases towing and transportation friction. A perfect building in the wrong logistics corridor can struggle against a less impressive facility that makes it easier for cars and buyers to arrive. Now the business begins to look less asset-light. The auction may not purchase the cars, but somebody still has to control the land where they wait. A representative physical operation might occupy around 20 acres, run 3 or 4 lanes, and offer roughly 400 to 500 vehicles during a weekly sale. Real facilities vary widely. A South Carolina auction opened on more than 20 acres, with 3 lanes and over 300 vehicles in its first sale. A Louisiana operation advertises more than 400 vehicles each week, across 4 lanes on 15 acres. Those acres need more than painted parking spaces. Vehicles must be checked in, photographed, inspected, grouped into sale order, moved safely, and stored while titles or payments are resolved. The property needs drainage, fencing, lighting, controlled gates, cameras, office space, auction lanes, inspection bays, and often reconditioning or light mechanical capacity. Add simulcast equipment so online buyers can see and bid in real time, and the auction becomes a logistics facility, a data platform, and a live event venue operating on the same property. For our representative model, assume the land or equivalent acquisition value is $4 million. Preparing the yard with paving, drainage, lighting, fencing, and staging areas adds another $4.5 million. Buildings, lanes, offices, inspection space, and reconditioning areas add $6 million more. Technology and equipment require about $1.5 million, while design, permits, legal work, and contingency add another $2 million. That puts fixed assets at $18 million before the business has enough working capital to survive opening. Add a $1.5 million reserve for payroll, title delays, arbitration, unexpected repairs, and slow early sales, and the total funding requirement reaches $19.5 million. This is a representative scenario, not a national average. A leased or converted facility could cost far less upfront. Lower initial capital usually reappears later as rent, restrictions, and renewal risk. The licensing fee itself is almost comically small beside the property. Texas, for example, uses a wholesale motor vehicle auction license that allows an operator to offer vehicles by bid to licensed dealers rather than retail customers. The renewal fee can be measured in hundreds of dollars, not millions. Florida also lists a motor vehicle auction license fee of only a few $100s. The difficult part is not writing the check for the license. It is building compliant premises, verifying dealers, maintaining insurance, controlling titles, and convincing the market to trust the sale. Insurance deserves special attention because the auction temporarily controls expensive property it does not own. Employees and temporary drivers move hundreds of unfamiliar vehicles in tight spaces. Buyers walk near active lanes, and cars can be damaged, stolen, misrouted, or loaded onto the wrong transporter. The business may need general liability, workers' compensation, commercial auto, property, cyber, crime, and coverage for vehicles in its care, custody, or control. None of those policies care that the auction did not technically own the inventory. The strategic value of this infrastructure became obvious when Carvana paid roughly $2.2 billion for ADESA's United States physical auction business in 2022. The deal included 56 locations, more than 4,000 acres, and roughly 6.5 million square feet of buildings. But it would be misleading to divide the purchase price by 56 and call that the value of an average auction. Carvana was also buying a nationwide logistics footprint and potential reconditioning capacity, not just lanes where dealers raise their hands. To see how a smaller operation turns infrastructure into revenue, go back to our 6-year-old sedan as it enters the gate. The vehicle identification number is recorded, the title status is checked, the mileage is entered, and the seller provides instructions about the minimum acceptable price. If the paperwork is incomplete, the problem has already begun before anyone places a bid. Next comes the condition report, where an inspector photographs the exterior, checks visible damage, records tire condition, notes warning lights, and may test major mechanical systems depending on the service purchased. This report matters even more when the buyer is bidding online and may never touch the vehicle before committing thousands of dollars. A careless description does not merely create an unhappy customer, it can create an arbitration claim that reverses the sale. The car is then assigned a run number and placed into a lane, sale group, or digital event. The seller may establish a reserve price, which means the highest bid is not automatically a completed transaction. If bidding stops below the reserve, the vehicle can leave unsold even after consuming inspection time, yard space, photography, software capacity, and sale day labor. If the bid is accepted, the auction can earn its basic transaction fees. In many marketplace models, fees are collected from both sides of the sale. OpenLane, a major digital wholesale marketplace, reported an average auction fee of $357 per vehicle sold in 2025. That figure is a useful benchmark, but it is not a universal fee schedule for every physical auction. Actual fees depend on vehicle value, customer agreements, volume, geography, and the services attached to the transaction. The transaction fee is only the beginning, because the buyer may order a post-sale inspection before transporting the car. The seller may have paid for cleaning, paintless dent work, mechanical repair, or more detailed imaging. The auction can arrange transportation, process the title, store the car after a free period expires, or provide administrative help when documents do not match. Some operators connect dealers with floor plan financing or other technology services. Not every vehicle purchases every service, and some of these services carry substantial direct costs. Transportation revenue is not pure profit when most of the payment goes to a carrier. Reconditioning can make the top line look impressive, while labor, materials, and subcontractors absorb much of it. Still, the physical auction has more opportunities to place paid services around a vehicle than a platform that only connects a buyer and seller online. Historical data makes that difference visible. In 2018, ADESA reported physical auction revenue of $844 per vehicle sold, including buyer and seller fees, along with ancillary and related services. That number is old and should not be treated as a current industry average. What it demonstrates is the shape of the model. A physical auction can earn materially more per completed vehicle when it performs work around the transaction. For our scenario, use $350 of transaction fee revenue and another $350 of ancillary revenue for each vehicle sold. That gives the auction $700 in recognized revenue per completed transaction. After roughly $170 of variable labor, inspection supplies, vehicle movement, payment processing, and service cost, each sold car contributes about $530 toward the facility's fixed expenses. Notice what is not included. If the sedan sells for $18,000, the auction does not automatically record $18,000 as revenue when it acts as an agent. That money economically belongs to the seller, less the relevant charges. Confusing gross vehicle value with auction revenue can turn a solid fee business into a fictional company hundreds of times larger than it is. The auction is not making a retail margin on our sedan. It is earning from the moment the car changes hands. Check-in creates information, inspection creates trust, bidding creates price discovery, and the services after the sale help the transaction finish. One car can support several layers of revenue without ever becoming the auction's inventory. This is the part of the business that looks brilliant on paper. The trouble is that nearly every important fee depends on a completed sale, while many of the largest expenses arrive whether the cars sell or not. To see how narrow that gap can become, assume our 4-lane auction offers 500 vehicles a week and operates 50 meaningful sale weeks each year. That gives it 25,000 vehicles offered annually. Not all 25,000 will sell, because physical auctions have historically reported conversion rates around the low 60s, while broader wholesale market data can be higher during strong periods. For the base case, use a sell-through rate of 62%. That produces 15,500 completed sales during the year. At $700 of revenue per sold vehicle, annual revenue reaches $10,850,000. Variable costs of $170 per sale consume about $2,635,000. The auction is left with a little over $8.2 million to cover everything that does not disappear when bidding slows down. Permanent payroll and benefits take roughly $3 million in our model. Property tax and insurance take another $750,000. Utilities, security, repairs, and routine property maintenance use about $850,000. Auction software, market data, cameras, and cybersecurity add roughly 450,000, while dealer relations, administration, legal, and compliance require another 850,000. Total fixed operating costs come to $5.9 million. Subtract those expenses, and the auction produces about $2,315,000 of EBITDA, a margin a little above 21% that sounds excellent until the capital structure arrives. Assume the owner finances 65% of the $18 million fixed asset project, leaving $11.7 million of debt. At a representative interest rate of 8.5% amortized over 20 years, annual debt service is roughly $1,218,000. The property and equipment also need about $500,000 of maintenance capital each year if the owner wants the operation to remain competitive. After debt service and maintenance capital, the owner is left with approximately $597,000 before income tax. The owner contributed $6.3 million toward the fixed assets and another $1.5 million in working capital, so total equity at risk is about $7.8 million. The resulting pre-tax cash-on-cash return is roughly 7.6%. That is not a disaster, but a functioning business producing positive cash flow and preserving ownership of a substantial property. It is still a long way from the effortless fee machine suggested by a yard packed with cars. The owner has placed nearly $8 million at risk, supported a large debt structure, and built an operation that cannot tolerate much weakness in weekly volume. The break-even calculation shows how little room exists. Each completed sale contributes about $530 after variable costs. The auction needs roughly 11,132 sold vehicles annually just to cover its $5.9 million of fixed operating expense. At a 62% sell-through rate, that means offering about 359 vehicles every week. Once annual debt service is included, the requirement rises to roughly 433 vehicles offered per week. Add maintenance capital, and the auction needs to offer approximately 464 vehicles each week to cover the entire cash burden. The base case offers 500, so the safety margin is not hundreds of vehicles, but roughly 36 offered vehicles per week. A parking lot can look almost exactly as busy as it did last month, while the owner's distributable cash flow quietly disappears. Now change only a few assumptions. Instead of 500 vehicles per week, the auction offers 450. Instead of selling 62%, it sells 55%. Revenue per sold vehicle slips from $700 to $650 as the operator discounts fees and sells fewer ancillary services to protect volume. Under those conditions, the auction completes about 12,375 sales and generates a little over $8 million in annual revenue. EBITDA falls to approximately $40,000. After debt service and maintenance capital, cash flow is negative by roughly $1,678,000. There was no recession in that example, no fire, and no spectacular lawsuit. One commercial seller moved part of its inventory elsewhere. A few dealers decided the run list was no longer worth the trip. Weaker competition pushed more vehicles below reserve, and lower service volume reduced revenue per car. Each change looked manageable on its own, but together they broke the economics. This is the volume trap. The auction can own none of the inventory and still carry nearly all the fixed cost pressure. The cars belong to somebody else, but the payroll, pavement, property tax, software contracts, and debt belong to the owner. At this point, the obvious solution seems to be moving the entire operation online. Digital marketplaces allow dealers to inspect listings and bid without leaving their lots. Sellers can reach buyers across the country instead of relying on whoever is willing to drive to a regional sale. Auctions can operate throughout the week, rather than concentrating activity into a few noisy hours inside a lane. The shift is already meaningful, with AAA members reporting about 820,000 digital-only transactions in 2025. OpenLane facilitated roughly 1.5 million vehicle transactions with gross merchandise value of about $28.8 billion that year across its markets. Digital platforms can create more buyer liquidity without building another 20-acre facility in every region. They also attack one of the physical auction's biggest costs: time. A dealer attending an in-person sale may lose half a working day, pay an employee to inspect cars, and still return without buying enough inventory. Online bidding turns that trip into a screen, broadens the selection, and makes it easier to compare vehicles from several sellers. But digital does not make the physical car disappear. Someone still has to verify the vehicle identification number, document damage, manage the title, and move the vehicle from its current location to the buyer. A condition report becomes more important, not less, when the buyer cannot touch the car. If the description is unreliable, national reach only spreads dissatisfaction across a larger customer base. This gives the physical auction a different reason to exist. Its advantage is no longer the theater of vehicles rolling through a lane. It is the ability to inspect, recondition, store, document, and transport vehicles in one controlled location. The strongest operator uses the yard as a service and logistics hub while allowing buyers to participate from anywhere. That hybrid model can improve the economics because the auction keeps local dealer relationships and commercial accounts, adds remote bidders to strengthen conversion, and earns physical service revenue around digitally completed sales. Technology can increase the number of buyers without requiring a larger grandstand, while the facility performs the work that cannot be reduced to a listing page. Carvana's purchase of the Odessa sites makes more sense through this lens. A 4,000-acre network has strategic value even if fewer buyers stand beside physical lanes. The same properties can support vehicle inspection, reconditioning, logistics, storage, and regional distribution. Digital bidding may reduce the importance of the auction room, but it can increase the value of everything happening behind it. Of course, a hybrid system creates its own dependency: trust. When a dealer buys a vehicle remotely, the condition report, title information, seller disclosures, and arbitration rules become substitutes for touching the car. If any part of that trust system fails, a transaction marked sold can begin moving backward. Imagine our sedan has already been purchased and loaded onto a transporter when the buyer discovers an undisclosed warning light or a material problem missing from the condition report. The buyer files an arbitration claim. The auction must review the listing, inspection records, announcements, and seller representations. Payment to the seller may be delayed, transportation may need to be reversed, and the vehicle can return to inventory. Industry arbitration policies generally treat the auction as the administrator rather than the buyer or seller in the underlying contract. That limits some exposure, but it does not make the problem free. Employees still spend time resolving the dispute, and every inconsistent decision damages trust with one side of the marketplace. Titles create another delay because a vehicle can be mechanically sound, fairly priced, and fully paid for, while still being commercially useless to the buyer if the title has not arrived or contains an unresolved lien. Dealers make money by turning inventory, so every day a title problem prevents resale, ties up their capital, and makes them less willing to buy from the same auction again. Then there are risks that never appear in the fee schedule. Vehicles can be stolen during transportation, payments can be fraudulent, and criminals can exploit title or identity gaps. Cars can be damaged by employees, weather, or other vehicles in the yard. A software failure during the sale can interrupt bidding at the exact moment liquidity is supposed to be highest. The auction also needs working capital, even though it does not normally fund the vehicle inventory. Sellers expect timely settlement, employees must be paid, repairs may already have been ordered, and arbitration can freeze cash between both sides of a transaction. The $1.5 million reserve in our model is not excess money sitting around. It is what prevents a timing problem from becoming a credibility problem. Market cycles add another layer. Wholesale used vehicle prices were higher year over year in June 2026, and national conversion data showed healthy demand during parts of the year. But a national index cannot rescue one auction that loses a commercial seller or fails to attract the right local dealers. The owner operates inside the national market but survives on regional liquidity. So, what does the final outcome look like? In the downside scenario, the auction generates almost no EBITDA and loses about $1.7 million after debt and maintenance. The facility can remain open and visually active while owner equity is being consumed. In the base scenario, the business earns nearly $2.3 million of EBITDA and distributes around $600,000 before tax. That is a legitimate operating result, but only about a 7.5% cash return on the equity committed to the project. Real estate ownership may add long-term value, although land does not appreciate automatically and the property may be difficult to reuse. In the upside scenario, the auction offers 550 vehicles per week, converts 68%, and earns $775 of revenue per sold vehicle. Annual revenue approaches $14.5 million, EBITDA reaches roughly $4.8 million, and cash after debt and maintenance can exceed $3 million. The difference is not that the upside auction owns better pavement. It has dependable consignors, enough buyers to create competitive bidding, disciplined title and arbitration processes, and a service operation capable of earning more from each completed vehicle. It uses digital access to expand liquidity without expanding fixed costs at the same speed. That tells you who should consider owning this business. The strongest candidate is not simply a real estate investor who found 20 cheap acres. It is someone with relationships across dealerships, banks, fleets, rental companies, and vehicle finance. The owner needs enough capital to survive weak sales, enough operational discipline to control hundreds of moving vehicles, and enough credibility to convince both sides that the auction will complete what it promises. The wrong owner builds the property first and assumes inventory will follow. The right owner secures the flow of vehicles and buyers before treating the facility as the business. Lanes can be constructed, software can be licensed, and parking lots can be paved. Liquidity has to be earned. An auto auction can absolutely make money from cars it never owns, but that does not make it an asset-light business. The owner still carries the land, the labor, the technology, the working capital, the operational risk, and the debt. When the marketplace is strong, one vehicle can produce several layers of revenue before it leaves the property. When the marketplace weakens, those same acres become an expensive place for unsold cars to wait. So if you still want to own an auto auction, remember what you are actually buying. It is not a field full of cheap vehicles, and it is not a guaranteed fee on every car that enters the gate. You are buying the responsibility to create a trusted market every single week. The cars may belong to somebody else, but the moment they change hands belongs to you.